We will start with 2 squares of fabric. I recommend you get something a bit thicker, not quite canvas, but maybe some cotton twill, corduroy in a color that maybe resembles gingerbread if you want it to look like a gingerbread house. And then you're going to make a template, or you can print mine for the door. You can use different fabrics for the door. You can use wool felt, you can use cotton. I'm going to use this piece of linen. We're going to sew the door to the square. The first step is cut the fabric that we're going to use for the door with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all around the template, so that you can press it under and sew it to the first square. So first you're going to press it with your fingers, and then you're going to press it with a hot iron. Once you have it like this, you're going to remove the template and center over one of the squares. You're going to make sure that you have equal distance to each side and that the bottom of the door is flush with the bottom of the one of the 10-inch squares. You're going to pin it all around and you're going to edge stitch it. That means that you're going to sew it really close to the edge. Then you're going to cut 2 windows. Try to place them in a pleasing way and that they're level to each other so that they look even. Now we're going to use the second square of fabric, and we're going to put an evergreen tree and our little witch. So using my template for the tree, you're going to place it 3/4 of an inch from the bottom and 3/4 of an inch from the side, and you're going to sew it all around with green thread. Now I've had the tree, and I'm going to cut all the templates for the little witch. Each one needs to be a different color: skin color for the face, another color for the hat, another color for the shawl and skirt. You can even make a piece of knitted fabric for the shawl or knit it yourself. You can also use fabric and fusible weft like we did with the windows, but I'm going to be using felt for all parts of the witch. And here I'm showing you all the different pieces and the colors I'm using. Gray for the skirt, brown for the shawl, a light skin color for the face, and red for the hat. So we're going to place the skirt at the same distance as the tree, 3/4 of an inch from the lower edge, and closer to the tree than the outside, because we're going to have that 1/4 inch seam allowance there. The first thing you're gonna sew is the skirt, and after that you're going to decide how you're going to organize the shawl and the face in a way that you like it. But you will sew them one by one. First the skirt, then the face, then the shawl, and then the hat. But first I decided to put a little piece of wool batting or wool stuffing inside the skirt to make it a little puffy. You don't have to use a lot, you just use a little bit. You want to have the shawl with the point looking down, and her head kind of peeking out of it. So every time that you sew a piece, you have to kind of decide where everything goes. And once you have an arrangement that you like, you can pin it and sew that part. You just want to have sort of a curve at the very top between the shawl and the head, so that the hat covers it well. So I kind of like this placement here. I'm going to remove the shawl and the hat, and then I'm going to sew the face. And if you're using wool felt or fabric, just use a thread that looks very similar to whatever wool felt you're using for the face. And you're going to be sewing with very small tiny stitches. I didn't sew the entire of the face, but most of the areas that I feel like might be seen or are going to be visible. So now I'm placing the shawl. I want it to come a little bit to the sides of the skirt, and I want the point going down, and I want it in this position so it looks almost as if she's a little bit hunched over and peeping out of her shawl. Now I've sewn the shawl. I'm going to be using a 1-inch piece of mohair weft. You can use yarn, you can use wool locks, you can use any other kind of weft that you like. I decided to use weft because it's already sewn, so it will be very secure, and you're just going to use enough to give your little witch a little bit of hair. Make sure that it doesn't come out of the hat. If you're using weft has a right and a wrong side. This side with the little cut fibers is the wrong side, and you can tell because it has a little folded edge, and the other side just has straight hair coming out. So this is the right side. So when you sew it to the witch, you're gonna sew it with the wrong side down, right side up. You can also make some cute little braids out of yarn and sew them to the hat. Just make sure that the root of whatever you're sewing is not too bulky, or it's going to change the shape of the hat. And so here it is, my little witch with her hat and her little braid. I braided it because we're gonna do some embroidery on her and I want the hair to kind of stay out of the way. So if you're gonna do any embellishment extra to these pieces, you wanna do it as much as possible when the pieces are flat, because it's gonna be the easiest for you. You can add candy, you can add certain sweets that are local to your area. We're gonna do some embellishment first to the windows and some embroidery on the door. We'll do some embroidery on the witch and we'll do embroidery on the tree. But you can add animals, you can add a squirrel, bird. So first we're gonna use a disappearing ink marker and make 3/4 inch lines on the door, so that we can use them as guidelines as we embroider the boards for the door. You can also use pieces of felt if you don't want to embroider, or you can leave the door as is. I'm using 3 strands of cotton embroidery flows, and I'm starting at the center to secure the fabric of the door to the square of 10 by 10, because we only sew the door all around it, so the fabric in the middle is floating. So with my embroidery stitches, I'm trying to secure it a little bit to the fabric, and so I'm using this type of stitch. You can see I go a little to the side of the line and I come on the other side of the line, and that makes kind of like a slanted stitch that looks very pretty and very bulky and is very noticeable. Try to finish your embroidery securely at the back of the work. Since you have 2 layers, it's kind of easy to hide any stitches or knots that you do. So now I'm going to do the rest of the boards with the same stitch. Here's the finished door. I added a little wood knot to the door and I went all around it, and so now we're going to use a small piece of brown felt to add a handle to the door. And with this type of work you can get so creative and have so much fun adding details. You can crochet the handle, you can even add it with a little piece of wood or ceramic, anything that you think will be sturdy and will look cute. You can get so creative, so don't feel limited by what I'm using. Try to think outside the box and think of more ways to embellish that little gingerbread house. I really enjoyed doing this, though it took quite forever to add all the details and to come up with more ideas. At some point I had to say that's enough, or we're going to make a very complicated project for our friends and their little Hansel and Gretel. And here we're starting with the witch. I'm just using a water-soluble fabric marker to mark all these little triangles because I'm going to do catch stitch. I'm using this stitch to add a little bit of folk appearance to her skirt. And again, I'm using 3 strands of embroidery thread. As you see here with the shawl, I made a mistake because stitches, especially embroidery stitches, when you add them over top of stuff, they add a lot of direction to the light, and they show you perspective. So it's important that you change them around, and you'll see what I mean with the tree. I'm just going to add a simple stitch for the eye of my little witch, and I'm using a very, very dark brown. You can use black, you can use blue if you want to give it color. You can use green, you can use any color that you like, purple. It's all up to you. It doesn't have to be realistic. Now I'm doing a little bit of French knots on the skirt of the witch. Again, I'm using 3 strands of cotton floss, and this is how I do my little French knots. the tree, I'm going to start with really long sets of 3 stitches to kind of define the lower tier of the tree. And you don't have to do the same stitches I'm using. You don't even have to embellish the tree. You can just leave it straight green. It did take a bit of time to embroider the entire tree, but I think it added a lot of charm to it. So that's why I recorded the whole thing. And with the tree, I did first I covered the entire tree kind of with the same method of 3 stitches or 2 stitches going upwards towards the top of the tree, using the same color thread, using 3 strands of embroidery thread. But it's important that you do first 1 layer with 1 color, and then that you start changing the color. So then you do the second layer with a different color, a third layer with another color, and so forth, so that you add visual interest to the tree. Here I'm going to use a different type of green, different shade of green, and I'm going to use kind of the same thing, stitches going upwards, but I'm going to get in between the first layer of stitches. You can see the finished tree with all its tiny and long stitches, and the little finished witch with her embroidered shawl and her embroidered skirt. Now we're just going to work a little bit more on the front. To do the top of the windows, you can just grab a very chunky yarn and sew it to the top. Mine's a bit soft and wonky. It's alpaca, so I'm going to crochet a chain that gives me the length of the window, and then I'm going to sew it to the top of the windows to finish those raw edges from the raw applique and to add a little bit more interest to the window. So I just crochet and measure as I go and see how far I get along. While I do that, you can watch the pretty birds eating from my cedar tree. Aren't they cute? Now I'm going to sew the first little chain of alpaca yarn to the top of the window, and so you can sew this any way you like. I'm sewing some little bits with backstitch, and then I go and secure with whip stitch the kind of outside the little chains so that you can't really move them around too much. So there's no specific or right way to do this. Just do it in whichever way finishes the windows best for you. Once you have done all your embellishments and you are satisfied with the way the front and the back look, we are going to sew them together. Try to get the little hair of the witch out of the way, and you're going to pin it all around and make a seam this way. I use 1/4 inch seam allowance, and because you have designs on the front and back, it kind of distorts a little bit the shape of the square, so just make sure that you pin it right at the raw edges, okay? You're going to leave the top open. Down, bottom, and the other side. I have now sewn both pieces with the exterior fabric, the front and back, and I have an extra 2 squares of 10 by 10 cotton, and I've sewn them around, but I've left a sizable opening so that I can turn everything right side out. I sewed up to here, then continued all around. Now we're going to make a little square at each corner so that the bottom of the bag has a little bit more room to accommodate for the dolls. On each corner, you're going to make a 1/2 inch square. So 1/2 inch starting from the seam line, 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch there, 1/2 inch there, 1/2 inch there, or on each of the 4 corners, both on the lining and on the exterior fabric. And then you're going to snip a little bit from your marking. So about 1/4 inch or a little bit less. It doesn't really matter because you're going to use the mark lines as your sewing line. You're going to open that little cut area like this and match the seam allowances by opening them up like this, and then you're going to sew right on that little line all the way across, making a 1 inch seam. Now you can see that I have my inch long seams, and I've pressed all seams open with the iron. Same on the lining. Now turn the lining right side out and right sides together. Put the lining inside the exterior fabric pouch. Make sure they're very well adjusted and match the side seam lines, and then pin it all around and sew them together all around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once you do that, you're going to turn the whole thing right side out through the hole that you left in the lining. Working all the corners flat with your fingers. It's gonna look like this, and you're gonna press the seam allowances to the side of the lining, and then you're gonna put the lining back inside the pouch and top stitch 1/4 inch from the edge. And here's a little partridge. While you go sew, we'll watch this cute little partridge on my crabapple tree. For the strap for the bag, I have cut a piece 36 inches long and 2 inches wide, and I'm going to press 1/4 inch on each side with the iron. Then I'm going to fold them over, sew it close, and sew on the other side. And then I have 4 pieces, 2 pieces for the outside of white felt in this shape, and 2 pieces for the inside of the same white felt. So I'm going to sew it all around the exterior, leaving the bottom edge open. We're going to trim the edges so that it's easier for those seams to light with less bulk inside because it's wool felt. Work all the seams flat with your fingers first, and then go press them with the iron. It's very important that you do this, or then the roof is going to look a bit wonky. Then you're going to match the side seams. You make sure that wrong sides together, so the roof is sitting one inside the other with the wrong sides touching, so that you are enclosing the seams that you made. So now you're going to match the side seams, and you can do 2 things. You can leave the one of the pieces, the inside piece, hang a little outside, or you can pin them flushed so that they're the exact same length. Whichever way you do it, it looks pretty. I do it with the bottom part peeking out a little bit. Then you're going to sew it all around. And so here we have the house sewn up and the roof sewn up, and we have to attach the strap. So the first step is to figure out where we're going to attach the strap. We're going to put it on, we're going to fold 1/4 inch down, and we're going to center it over one of the seams, and we're going to sew it 1/4 inch from the beginning. Then we're going to make a little mark on the roof, a little hole. But first, here's the strap sewn in. I reinforce with a diagonal seam line. It's 1 inch of the strap sewn to the bag, 1/4 inch from the top, with 1/4 inch folded. Before we sew the other side, we have to decide exactly where we're going to make that slit on the snow roof. Because the snow roof is going to have 2 slits that the strap is going to go through, so it doesn't get lost. So you're going to make your marking right about there on both sides of the roof. You fold it and match both sides, mark them with a pencil, and then you're going to slip through both layers of felt. Very carefully try to make the opening just a tiny bit smaller than the width of the strap, because it's going to stretch a little bit as you work with it. But so be very careful when you're snipping away so that you don't cut too much. Okay, you can reinforce this seam with the sewing machine. You can do zigzag or you can do straight stitch if you're scared that it's going to rip open. I am going to do buttonhole stitch to finish it and make it look pretty. So here is me trying to hold on both pieces of felt, and I am using the full strand, the full 6 strands of embroidery thread, and it's very hard to push it through the felt. So I'm gonna have to use pliers for a little bit, and then I change to my hemostats. But I just wanted to show you how I do the buttonhole stitch to finish those 2 slits for the gingerbread house. Once you finish both slits on the roof, you're going to weave the strap through one edge or one side. You're going to weave the strap through one side, and without twisting the strap. This is very important because you're going to sew it, so it better not have any knots or twists. And you're gonna push it through the other slit, make the tiny little fold at the bottom, and sew it in the exact position as the other end of the strap. You're gonna center it over that side seam, sew for about 1 inch of the strap to the bag and 1/4 inch empty at the top, from the top of the bag. Pin it and sew it. And that's it, my friends, we're almost ready. And so here is a little bag all finished up. You can of course add a myriad of decorations to the roof. You can add birds, you can add buttons, you can add chimney, you can add whatever you like. In my next video, I'm going to show you the dolls inside and any little extras I may have added. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me in the making of the little gingerbread house for Hansel and Gretel.